The other counterpart for that.
Charger needs to be put and that HDMI. Like you know how to put
This is the HDMI. So let us put the HDMI cable to this. This we will connect.
and the charger, like this tablet charger.
You have to put the charger. Where is the charger? It is C port. We have the C port connected. This one.
both are
और क्या बोलो नहीं चार्जर है हाँ you can keep a charger there. You can keep a charger there.
This will charge?
हाँ is it on?
See the connections from okay.
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे please guide us as we try to understand your pastimes, even when they are difficult to understand. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Okay, it's myself now. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Are all of you able to hear me? So thank you for coming today. And when we talk about cultivating bhakti, Krishna repeatedly in the Bhagavad Gita mentions Mani Arpita Mano Buddhi. That it is when we are trying to say direct ourselves towards Krishna, then it is through both these channels. Generally, the mana is associated with emotions, and the buddhi is associated with reason. So normally we consider devotion to be an emotion, and it is certainly an emotion, no doubt. But it is not just an emotion. Devotion is actually about a relationship with Krishna. And that relationship means that our entire being needs to be connected with Krishna. So, while there are many pastimes which can increase our attraction towards Krishna, the attraction is one aspect, and that's wonderful, that's what we want. But we also need conviction. So conviction is what links our buddhi. Attraction is what links our emotional side. Now, for the emotional side, generally speaking, there is not such a categorical differentiation that where do emotions reside or come from. There is the word, the heart, that is used. Now, the word heart is used in literal sense. It is the organ that pumps blood. But when in orderly parlance, somebody says, "You broke my heart," the person may say, "Okay, let me check, do an X-ray to check." Now I feel like breaking your head now. So, when we are using the word heart, we are using it to refer to the seat of emotion, not the physical organ. So, if you consider the heart as the seat of emotion, then what is it referring to? At one level, it refers to the mind, at another level, it refers to the soul. Ultimately, consciousness comes from the soul. And therefore, even the capacity for desiring comes from the soul. The capacity to experience emotions comes from the soul. That consciousness is manifesting through the mind. And therefore, it gets filtered, it gets distorted, it gets basically affected. So that's why right now we can say most of our emotions. So we could say there's a difference between emotion in principle and emotions, whatever emotional there, in practice. So emotion itself, it comes from the soul. In that sense, you can say it's spiritual. Now, specific emotions, it depends. Are the emotions material? Are the emotions spiritual? So, generally speaking, the difference between spiritual versus material, it is done in two broad ways. One is through content, and the other is through other than content, that is intent plus consequence. So what does that mean? That say we could say the body is material. It is made up of earth, water, fire, air. The spiritual tattva is made of Satchitananda. So in that sense, matter and spirit are categorically different. And this is what chapter 2 of the Gita focuses on. And this is broadly the approach of Vedanta. But beyond that, as we move forward, especially into Bhakti Yoga, the idea is that even matter can be used for a spiritual purpose. So, Srila Prabhupada would say that this mic, it is now being used to speak about Krishna. So, it is spiritual. So, now what is Prabhupada doing? Prabhupada is looking at the intent. Why are we using it? Now, we could also look at the consequence. So, basically, especially in chapter 18, Krishna talks about how even work can be done in the mode of worship. So if you say work in content is mundane, I'm doing my job so that I can earn my livelihood, I can get respectable position in society. But then what is the underlying intent we have for seeking all those things? So karmana tamabhyaj. So what applies to external objects also applies to internal. So we could categorize our emotions in terms of content as well as intent and consequence. Generally speaking, with respect to emotions, intent is what is focused on more than consequence. Although consequence can also be considered. So now, what this means is that there doesn't have to be such a radical differentiation. Say if you want to between material and spiritual all the time. Say for example, if you consider Mother Yashoda's love for Krishna. Now, we can say it is nothing like a mother's love for a child. Well, if we say that, then you may wonder, how do we relate with it? Isn't it? It is not entirely like a mother's love for a child, because this child is a supreme person. Our love is far, far more selfless. But if we completely disconnect it from the material, then we will never be able to understand it at all. Now, the point is that we have Falena Parichayati. So Prabhupada gives the result. So if by comparing, say, a parent's relationship with the child, or Krishna's parents' relationship with, say, the relationship of parents with the child. And the result could go two ways. That it is that our attraction to Krishna, our appreciation for Krishna, our attraction for how Krishna reciprocates love with his devotee, that can increase. Now, we could say that by hearing that our attachment to our children may increase. That is possible. But relatively speaking, that can happen through so many sources. It's not necessarily that will happen by hearing about how Yashoda Mai loves her child. It can happen. So, Falena Parichayati. Now, things however change when we consider the Madhurya Ras. When we hear about Radha Krishna pastimes, because lust is such a, you could say, triggerable emotion, that's why we have a revised caution over it. And that's why there the emphasis on the Bhed aspect is given more. That relationship is completely spiritual. That relationship is based on selflessness. Now, what does spiritual mean? Spiritual could mean that their forms are completely transcendental. That's why that relationship is different. Spiritual could also mean that actually through that relationship, what is the desired or expected result? The Bhagavatam says, through hearing that actually our lust will decrease. So, what I'm saying is here, material spiritual relationships. When we talk about it, our material relationship versus spiritual relationships. Now we could focus on the abhed part. This is especially with respect to Vatsalya Rasa or even Sakhya Rasa. Now the result of that likely is that our attraction to Krishna increases. Now, when we may focus on the Bhed aspect, so that in the Madhurya, especially, so that our attraction to lust doesn't increase. So this abhed is something which goes on constantly. And now, why are we talking about all this right now? The point is that When we hear Krishna's pastimes, we need to find out what is connecting me with Krishna and what is disconnecting me or diverting me from Krishna. And generally speaking, when we hear Krishna Lila, at that time, primarily it's a matter of the heart. We invest our heart's emotions and try to become immersed in Krishna Lila. And we do use reason, we do use logic, but most of the time, say in Krishna's childhood pastimes, especially the pastimes that to be relished, it's like reason is almost like an ornament. It's not like the main thing. It's like a spice in the food. The main food is that oh, this pastime is so sweet and loving. But the analysis that is done, so for example, the Damodar pastime itself is very sweet. The two fingers, what do the two fingers symbolize? That is like an additional insight. It's valuable, but it's additional. So we could say broadly, we talk about Krishna Lila. You say most of it is for relishing. And when it is for relishing, then we approach it primarily through our heart. I talk about heart and mind as related in the sense that if I go back over here, see, emotions can come from the mind, emotions can come from the soul. Ultimately, all emotions come from the soul, although the specific emotions may be arising, or rather the capacity for experiencing emotions comes from the soul. Or the specific emotion may be arising from the mind. So it is for us, for the Mahaprabhu says, Mora Man Vrindavan. Mora Man Vrindavan. He's not saying Mora Atma Vrindavan, he's not saying Mora Hridaya Vrindavan. He says that sometimes, other times. But Mora Man Vrindavan. The idea is that the mind itself has now become filled with such spiritual and emotional impressions that the mind is just like Vrindavan. That means the seat of all my emotions is centered around Krishna. So for us, when we are trying to connect with Krishna, sometimes our emotions can connect us to Krishna, and sometimes our emotions can disconnect us. And if the emotions are disconnecting us, then we may have to regulate the emotion and then not let our emotions get engaged too much in it. So sometimes we will just choose not to hear certain pastimes. So specific intimate details of the Raslila pastimes, we may choose especially from that time onward, Acharyas comment, don't hear those pastimes prematurely. So now this is the background for all this is that some Krishna Lila is to be approached through emotion. So that's what will connect us. But some Krishna Lila may need analyzing. And there we need to connect primarily with the head, with reason. So, why am I discussing this? Because while in Dwarka, we could be discussing various pastimes in continuation of yesterday's theme of processing events that can challenge our faith. We'll be focusing on the concluding pastimes of Krishna, which is generally not discussed. And those can be very, at the very least, question-inducing, if not quite destabilizing for one's faith. So I'll go back to the framework that I had introduced in the first session of various ways in which Krishna Lila can be approached, or the Lord Pastime can be approached. Anyone remember this acronym? Did I mention the acronym at all or no? Yes. L was literal. So we look at the stories and we hear the story, the result of this is generally entertainment. E was ethical. So at the ethical level when we approach, we seek guidance for decision making. Then there is allegorical. Allegorical is that what does this represent? What does this symbolize? Now this is primarily, it gives us an intellectual illumination. So guidance, when I say guidance for decision making in our life, for acting in our life. So we may say how Ravana was lusty, and therefore we should not be lusty. I give the allegorical is those two fingers, what do they represent? Now we may say that there's no mention of the two fingers representing something in the Bhagavatam itself. Right? So the pastime itself is not allegorical. It is that the pastime can be seen from an allegorical perspective. Prabhupada was concerned if we reduced the entire pastime to non-literal thing. That's what some Indian leaders tried to do about the Mahabharata war, saying that actually it's just symbolic. It represents the fight between the Kauravas and the Pandavas, who are like our lower desires and higher desires, and the Kurukshetra is like our war. That metaphor itself is not wrong. You can use the metaphor like that. But the problem is when we reduce it only to metaphor, then it becomes a problem. And then D is the devotional level. And here we can say it brings absorption, it brings ecstasy. So each of these levels has its own result. And at one level, the literal and this devotional can seem similar. Seem similar in the sense that they can seem non-intellectual. Why non-intellectual? Because the focus is not so much of analyzing. The focus is on relation. If a movie is going on, and in the middle of the movie, then suddenly the director appears and starts explaining, okay, this represents this represents this. You should not act like this, you should act like this. I didn't come to hear a lecture. I came to watch a movie. Now, even in entertainment, some messages can be taught, but they have to be much more subliminal. They have to be much more subtle. So, the idea is that literal and devotional, they can seem non-intellectual. And many pastimes can be approached at this level, and it's wonderful. But there are some pastimes, even with respect to Krishna, when we are approaching him, we have to evaluate what is anukul and what is practical. So for some pastimes, we may need to approach them more through our buddhi, through our reasoning, than through our emotion. So, with this background, let's move towards the Dwarka pastimes. I'll do a quick overview before we come to the key pastime that we'll discuss. When Krishna relocated to Dwarka, at one level it was to protect the Mathuravasis, who were being repeatedly attacked. Now Krishna himself was capable of protecting them, but Krishna didn't want to have to be there constantly for protection. Krishna loved the Pandavas, he wanted to be the Pandavas. Krishna had to establish Dharma. So Krishna relocated them to Dwarka. It was quite a radical move. And now, from the Gaudiya Vaishnava perspective, Jiva Goswami says that Krishna was protecting not just the Mathuravasis but also the Vrajavasis. Because while he could physically be there to protect Mathura, because he was there, but the invaders would often come through the Vrindavan area. And if they came to know how prosperous Vrindavan was or how dear the Vrajavasis were to Krishna, then they might disrupt Vrindavan. Generally, civilians would not be attacked, but it is not an absolute, non-negotiable principle. Sometimes, who knows what demoniac people might do. So, Krishna decided to protect the Vrajavasis also by moving far away from them. So, while he was in Dwarka, he was also traveling constantly, going through various places, and he helped the Pandavas win the Kurukshetra war. And overall, if we look at it from an objective perspective, not just an emotional perspective, so we see that there are certain crowning moments in Krishna's life. See, if you look at our own life, it's not that every day is like an equal memory for us. Some days they stand out. It is really wonderful. Some days will be unfortunately painful, whatever it is. So, if we consider Krishna's life trajectory, life story, so Krishna's killing Kamsa was like his emerging on the big scene. It's coming out in the big picture. Then Krishna establishing Dwarka, that was also a remarkable move. So, distinguishing Dwarka can be seen from a mystical perspective that Krishna created a city in the ocean, and that's you can look at it from a devotional perspective, but even from a strategic perspective. The Dwarka was like an island in the ocean. Some narratives say it was underwater, but the Bhagavatam doesn't seem to support that idea. It was an island and was well protected. So you could say that Ravan had captured Lanka from Kuvera so that he could stay protected. The water is generally a very good enclosure to protect oneself. So all side water is there, then protected. So Krishna, in one sense, took that strategy. In fact, that's one of the reasons why America is relatively considered to be, it's like historical. Because the geopolitical experts say that there is no country in the world that is as geopolitically blessed as America. Because surrounded by oceans from both sides and relatively non-powerful neighbors are all around. So they don't have a threat. Of course, immigration is now becoming a threat for them, at least. But, and according to some people, it's like no country is as geopolitically threatened as India. Because from below we have ocean, but the ocean is not very far away from land masses. So attacks can come from ocean, and above, although there are mountainous ranges, but still there are passes through that. That's why India has been repeatedly attacked. One of the reasons why Britain, although it is such a small country, was so successful was, again, it was an island. Although the water body is not much protecting it from, separating it from Europe, but still it is there. So that India as a country and a civilization has survived is a historical miracle. Now you could say China is landlocked, not entirely, landlocked to a large extent. Russia is also landlocked to a large extent. Yes, they are also vulnerable. But to some extent, the weather over there makes things almost unlivable. Not unlivable, almost it's very difficult to function. One of the main reasons say Hitler's war initiative against Russia did not succeed. Hitler came very close in the Second World War, he came very close to Russia, to Moscow. It couldn't succeed just because the weather became so cold and he was not prepared for that. He thought that he would win long before winter came about. And he was caught completely unprepared. So I don't want to go into geopolitics, but the point I'm making is that while we may take specific incidents today and think how terrible this is, but from the bigger picture perspective, if we consider the various ancient civilizations that were there, the Egyptian civilization, the Assyrian civilization, the Mesopotamian civilization, the Chinese civilization, if you go to those countries, very little of that civilization is present today. Egypt today has nothing to do with the pharaohs. China today, some attempt to have civilizational continuity, but China today has very little to do with Confucius or Tao or anything like that. The word Tao has become common, but not much. There's some continuity there. But India has a significant level of continuity. So the resilience is, from a historical perspective, remarkable. Now, so Krishna arranged for the protection of Dwarka, but the nature of the world. So we could look at it, as I talked about the literal perspective, establishing Dwarka was a significant incident. Then the whole Kurukshetra war, before that, we could say, the Rajasuya Yajna, in which Krishna was made the king. Was made the king? No, the Agrapurush, the greatest person. That was quite significant. So and this was like the inner motive of the Pandavas for doing that whole ceremony. From the external perspective, the Mahabharata often gives more of the Karma Kanda perspective. The Bhagavatam gives more of the Bhakti perspective. So, because the ethic, Karma Kanda is some level, some kind of ethical perspective. And okay, we should act in this particular way. So Narada Muni tells Yudhishthir that his father has not attained Swarga. His father is in Pitraloka. His father was pious, but he died due to a curse while he was attracted to his wife. And because his consciousness was a particular way, that's why he didn't go to heaven. So then Vishnu said, what can I do to ensure that he rises to heaven? Then he said, you do the Rajriya. So that is one purpose for him to do the Rajriya, okay? From an ethical perspective. He has duty to his father. From an emotional perspective, it is just to glorify Krishna. So that was a very significant incident. Then the Kurukshetra war, in which, while Krishna himself does not fight, Krishna establishes his strategic expertise and he helps the Pandavas win. See, now here also, yesterday I was talking with some devotees. They're saying that whenever anything happens against Hindus, the media doesn't report and nobody seems to take it seriously. And yes, there is truth to that. But the point is that it is not unprecedented. If you consider 11 Akshamuni people supported the Kauravas, Pandavas are only 7. And we can discuss this later. But the point is that while the Pandavas were in the forest, they were cut off from the world, and Duryodhana was building alliances during that time. Duryodhana was, to use a contemporary word, was creating his own narrative. That he was doing his own propaganda and he's winning people over. Now you may think an incident as blatant as attempting the disrobing of Draupadi. How do you spin that? Yeah, it's just a indefensible incident. But it seems Duryodhana was able to spin it in such a way that even Balramji got affected. Initially, when Balram comes, after the disrobing incident happens, he comes and meets the Pandavas in the forest. After they have heard about it, they rush to meet them. Even Balram is incensed. This is outrageous. But then Balram goes and meets Duryodhana. And then after the exile is over, the Pandavas are in the Virat kingdom, and there Ashwatthama gets married to Uttara. Sorry, Abhimanyu gets married to Uttara. And that time everybody comes over there. So even the Dwarkavasis come. And when they are discussing what to do at that time, Balram says that you don't have a right to be so indignant and angry. Whatever happened was your fault. Says nobody forced you to gamble. It was Yudhishthir who put Draupadi on the stake. So what happened to Draupadi was as much Yudhishthir's mistake as it was Duryodhana's. The Pandavas are very distressed to hear this. They realize that Duryodhana has been at work. So the point I'm making is that we could say that there are so many bad people. Generally we talk about this figure of 7 versus 11 to show how even if we are materially weaker, so like Krishna's might, we can win. The Pandavas were like that. That's definitely a way of looking at it. The other way is that how was Duryodhana able to win over so many people? I would say all those people were either foolish or evil. Then possibly. But if you look at the actual incidents in the war, most of them fought honorably. They were honorable Kshatriyas. So that is the power of narrative building. That while the Pandavas were isolated in the forest, Duryodhana was not just building his military might, Duryodhana was also creating a narrative. And that is where we often lack. That is where our side of the story is something which we have to tell. And we have to tell it not in an emotional way, these people are so terrible, so many bad things have happened to me. Every tradition is known to, every religion is known to play the victim game. In fact, if you just go and search in Google on Christianity in India, from our perspective, concern is there's so much conversion there. But if you see what mainstream comes is, Christians are being persecuted in India. And in fact, that is one of the main points in America they use for fundraising. That Christians are under attack. Now, that will be happening in a very small place somewhere. And quite often those attacks are not targeted against Christians. Say a church is vandalized. There was some incident of church basically vandalized, and then there's some one Hindu scholar did some comparative research. He said in that same time, 5 times more temples were vandalized, and these are simple robbery. It had nothing to do with religion. Temples or churches they have some wealthy thing. If they don't have good security, they'll be vandalized. But that was spun in the religion. So this is just a fact of life that narratives will be made, and we need to be aware of it, and we need to be countering it. So unfortunately, if we don't do that, then it is our own history tells us what happens. So the Pandavas were disconnected from the world, and while we may not have been exiled, sometimes when we become devotees, we sort of put ourselves in a self-imposed exile. That means we don't care for the world at all. In fact, many devotees exhibit their material ignorance as a proof of their transcendence. So, I'm so transcendent, I don't even know who is the Prime Minister of my country. No, that's not a healthy thing to do. Because we have Vidyamcha is the Vedo. So forming alliances, creating advocacy groups, telling our side of the story is very important. If we don't do that, then we may be right, but people are not going to presume that we are right. We may say we are being victimized, but very few people will actually believe that, because everyone plays the victim game. And because Hindus are seen to be majority over here, so the default conception is that the majority can never be victims. The majority will be the victimizers. Now that logic is actually not applied to the caste system. The Brahmanas are seen as the victimizers. But the Brahmanas are always in minority. The Brahmanas are the majority. So it's very convenient when the logic is used. But this has to be challenged and exposed rationally, not emotionally. So emotions are good for connecting with Krishna. Although sometimes our emotions may also disconnect us from Krishna. But especially when we are trying to connect with others, if you have to, certainly there has to be some emotion, because we have to show that we care for the cause. But our emotion should not be devoid of reason. The reason should be there very much in explaining what things are and how they are to be, what are the issues at heart are. So anyway, so like this, the Kurukshetra war was a major incident, and now, let's say, before this, of course, Krishna's marriage was a significant incident. The marriages, and that's described in the Bhagavatam, how he married so many queens, and especially how he saved those women whom Bhaumasura had persecuted. So, while all this is happening, Krishna's influence was increasing. And Dwarka was also becoming more and more powerful. Dwarka was considered practically impregnable. There was only one demon, Shalva, who attacked, and that too also he had to do a lot of things. He had to get a mystical airplane by worshipping Lord Shiva, and then also he was eventually defeated. But otherwise, Dwarka was impregnable. Now then, so now I talk about this lead acronym: literal, ethical, allegorical, and devotional. So many times we may not realize that there are these different levels, and then we may suddenly jump from one level to another. Say, we may analyze the Mahabharata or the Ramayana from an ethical perspective, and say how Lord Ram obeys his parents, how Lord Ram protects Sita, and how we learn ethical lessons from it. Then somebody asks, okay, why did Ram kill Vali from behind? That is his Leela. Now, Leela as an answer is scripturally faithful and intellectually frustrating. Because to a rational mind, you can say a rational or a little more skeptical mind, Leela seems to be just like intellectual escapism. That when you don't have an answer, you say it's Leela. And then that way, it just puts off thoughtful. So, how could Yudhishthir have gambled, bro? Oh, it's all a Leela. Then yes, it's a Leela, but then what are we doing? We are not treating it all as a Leela all the time. So when we want, we analyze, see, this character acted like this, we should act like that. And other time, oh no, this is Leela. So don't analyze it. It doesn't work so well. Now, of course, we understand the principle that there are some pastimes of Krishna which are we emulated in our life. We learn lessons and apply, but there are some which are not to be imitated. That is true. However, still, even those pastimes that are not to be imitated, we need to be able to understand and explain them from a rational perspective, especially if they seem ethically questionable, or logically questionable, ethically questionable, then it needs to be explained properly. And Prabhupada is also was very pragmatic. When he was in Hawaii, once some devotees asked him that, Prabhupada, when we talk with the scholars and we tell them that Krishna was in Dwarka, he had some, it is not Krishna, but effectively, or actually, nominally it was Ugra Singh. He had some phenomenal number of bodyguards. So, they say, how did all of them live in the island of Dwarka? The number is described so big that even the entire Earth's population cannot sustain it. At least as far as I understand. So how did they live there? Now, I remember one person he was very and devotee, young devotee. He said, I asked this young devotee, and he said that Krishna is omnipotent. Krishna can nourish the entire creation on the tip of a needle. Now, yes, that is true. But what happens is, this is not a logical answer. And now the question, what is Prabhupada's approach over here? So the devotee said, when you tell this to the scholars are laughing at us. He says, where do all of them live? Where were their toilets? Where were their homes? How do they function? So what is Prabhupada's answer? Prabhupada said, among all the thousands of verses in the Bhagavatam, was that the only thing you found to speak to the scholars? So one of the offenses against the holy name is to instruct the faithless people in the glories of the holy name. Now what does that mean? It means that many things, but one thing it means is that we should not speak those things which the audience cannot be reasonably expected to have faith. So it is our responsibility, not just the problem with people that they are faithless. We need to present things in such a way that people can have reasonable faith in those things. You see, Prabhupada's approach in the West, Prabhupada introduced the Hare Krishna Kirtan, which people would experience to be good. People introduced the body-soul difference, Prabhupada introduced the body-soul difference, which people could understand. Prabhupada talked about the futility of material enjoyment, which was a need for people to understand. Although it was something very challenging for them, but they could experience it. That yes, it certainly doesn't live up to all the hype that is there. Prabhupada did introduce Krishna way too early, especially pastimes of Krishna. And Prabhupada gave the Krishna book, he gave a lot of philosophical buffer within it to help people make sense. So it's important for us to present things in a way that can make sense to people. So, in fact, this is what Prabhupada called as realization. So, realization means that if this is the message of scripture and these other audience's interests. So Prabhupada says realization is to present scripture in a way that is interesting for the audience. So what would be interesting? That will depend on time, place, circumstance. Now, the interest is just one word, which is representative. Generally, we're going to connect with the audience, we say we should be nice to them. Does anyone know what is nice? Nice is basically four things: needs, interests, concerns, and expectations. So nice doesn't just mean sweet and sweet and sugary. It just means that we need to be able to connect with the audience. We need to what are their needs, what are their interests, what are their concerns, what are their expectations. So with this background, now let's look at the particular pastime under consideration. So when an incident happens, like I mentioned earlier, an incident can have multiple causes. So the Pandavas are, the Pandavas are living in Indraprastha now, and the Yadus are living in Dwarka. And the Yadus are living virtuously, they are powerful, they are flourishing. And then the Yadus decide to go to Prabhas. And when they decide to go to Prabhas, they're actually going there to do some dharmic rituals. Now, before that, it is said that to some extent, some of the children of Krishna, they become a little spoiled. They become a little powerful. Now, power is perfectly fine. They are powerful. They are Chaitanya children, they are Krishna children. But they become a little arrogant because of that. It's possible. But it's not that they are not virtuous. It's just that they exhibit their power sometimes. And they mistreat a sage. Most of you know the story that they take one of the boys, disguises like a woman who is pregnant, and says to sages, please tell us, is this going to be a boy or a girl? And the sages feel mocked and they say, whatever this is, this will be the cause of your destruction. Now, generally when an incident happens, there could be multiple causes for it. So there is a proximate cause, proximate means immediate or and there is a distant cause. So there is also that after all her sons are killed, Gandhari curses Krishna. And she says, just as I have to live with the destruction of my entire dynasty, you will have to live with the similar destruction. Now Krishna says that I tried my best to avoid the war. You know yourself how Duryodhana was, and he didn't listen to my peace proposal. Although even you tried to make him see sense, but still, I accept your verse. So we'll talk about the accepting of verse. So basically, these two incidents are there that are both of them are in one sense causes at a particular level. So when Krishna Lila is happening, Krishna has multiple purposes to demonstrate. So at one level, through what all is Krishna demonstrating through Krishna Lila? One is dharma, the other is bhakti. These two we may say are similar, but they are not. Krishna, if you see what is the difference between dharma and bhakti, that Krishna talks about this in 4, 7 and 8. That whenever dharma goes down, dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge. And 4, 9 and 10 is janma karma cha me divyam. And that is goes on to mad bhava marga. The bhava can refer to emotion, bhava can also refer to the nature, the attain my nature. That is they come to me. So now it's interesting the way Krishna explains it, that actually it's something like a funnel. See, dharma is universal in the sense that it is mandatory for everyone. Krishna says, I come to establish dharma. So dharma in that sense is like law and order. That has to be established. It's not a matter of personal choice. If somebody says, I won't follow the speed limits, I won't drive in the right lane. If you won't drive in the right lane, then we will get you out of the road transport system. We'll take away your license, we'll put you in jail. So, dharma is not mandatory. That's why here, the way Krishna is using dharma over here, it has nothing to do with religion. The word dharma can mean religion at other times, but in this context, the Kurukshetra war was not a war for dharma in the sense of religion. Why is that? Because if you see the Kurukshetra war, the Kauravas and the Pandavas. Now, among the Pandavas, there was Drupada. And if you read the Mahabharata, Drupada was a Shaivite. His Kuladaivat was Lord Shiva. And that's why we have Draupadi having worshipped Lord Shiva and getting 5 husbands. On the Pandava side, there was Bhishma. On the Kaurava side, Bhishma was a Vaishnava. Similarly, Bhurishrava was a Vaishnava. So, it was not a battle between, say, devotees and non-devotees. It was not that, if the Kauravas just became devotees, then the war would end. It was not a battle to force Kauravas to become devotees. The point was they were doing unrighteous things. So the war was a dharma yuddha, but dharma means law and order. A person like Duryodhan who had stolen, who had done so many criminal activities, he had to be stopped. So that's why when you use the word dharma yuddha, it is used in Mahabharata. But when we today use the word dharma yuddha, many people think of it as a religious war. And then they identify it with jihad and other things. But this is quite different. It was not a religious war. Now, bhakti is to be inspired. Krishna comes to establish dharma. Bhakti is voluntary. Bhakti is a matter of love. You cannot force anyone to practice bhakti. You can facilitate it, you can inspire it, but it's a matter of the heart. And Krishna is not a God who says that if you don't believe me, I'll send you to hell. In hell, there's a fundamental difference. Now, I'm going into diversions, but I'm going into diversions for the purpose. So I'm going to illustrate a particular point over here. See, there's a big difference in it. The idea of hell is there across all religious traditions. But in the Abrahamic religions, Abrahamic, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, hell is for non-believers. In the Vedic tradition, hell is for wrongdoers. It is not for non-believers. Somebody may disbelieve in Krishna, but if they are living in Sattva, if they are living a life of Punya, they are doing puja to the Devatas, they will go to Swarga. So, somebody could be an atheist. They may not even do anything, have anything to do with us. But if they are living a life of Sattva, we say, can I atheist be sattvic? Well, in terms of belief system, atheism is not sattvic belief system. But in terms of lifestyle, an atheist can be kind, an atheist can be polite, an atheist can be charitable. Now, generally speaking, these virtues exist in an atheist not because of their atheism, but in spite of their atheism. Maybe they had a good upbringing, maybe they were inspired by certain people. But, so in that sense, we could say hell is like a prison. It's for solving a law and order problem. So, what is the point I'm making over here? And when you go back over here, and Krishna is talking about his purpose. The bigger purpose is to establish dharma. Now, we go to the bigger purpose ultimately to inspire bhakti. Yes, that is true. So, it's like Krishna exists in the spiritual world and this is the material world. So, Krishna only descends as avatar from the spiritual world to the material world. So, you could say one purpose is to establish dharma. And then within that, a smaller purpose is to inspire bhakti by which a person goes back. So, dharma is to be able to establish order in this world. And while dharma and bhakti are related, these two purposes are not the same. Sometimes bhakti requires the giving up of dharma. That's what Krishna says, Sarva Dharman Parityajya, Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja. And the gopis are examples of that. When they respond to Krishna's flute play and they come, they are giving up dharma. In normal society, if the women leave their family and leave their husband and go to meet some other man, that would create big disruption in society. So that is seen as the glory of their devotion. that their bhakti is so great that they are ready to give up even the good for Krishna. Giving up the bad for God is good, but giving up even the good for God, good in terms of what is virtuous, what will bring them a good reputation, that is very difficult, that is glorious. So sometimes there may be a tension between dharma and bhakti. Sometimes Krishna emphasizes bhakti. Sometimes he emphasizes dharma. So, in the Bhagavatam, the Gopi's pastime also, Krishna acts as if, or Krishna arranges that there are some illusory gopis. It's like in the Ramayana, we have Maya Sita, you also have there are Chaya gopis. So they are there in their homes. The Bhagavatam also mentions that. So that the family thinks, oh, the gopis wanted to go, but we told them not to go and they didn't go. And they stayed on. So Krishna preserves dharma also. While emphasizing bhakti, Krishna preserves dharma. So dharma and bhakti sometimes can be in tension. So when Krishna tells Yudhishthira, tell Drona that Ashwatthama is dead. After that, what happens? The chariot goes down. Now, from the bhakti perspective, it is said that this chariot went down because Yudhishthira hesitated in obeying Krishna. But the Mahabharata doesn't say this. The Mahabharata says his chariot went down because he did speak a lie. So he was always virtuous and he spoke a lie. So the dharma and bhakti, they sometimes are in tension. And this tension between dharma and bhakti comes to its height in the pastime of the departure of the Yadus from the world. So what happens is that the Yadus, they go to Prabhas, they do their pious activities. But it is, see, many times, it is the religious activities in the past. It was like religious plus, you could say, entertainment. They were combined together. So, for example, when the yajnas are performed, there is religious plus social, religious plus entertainment, all that was together. If the sacrifices are performed, the yajna is one event, but then how everybody is seated is also a social event. That's why Parvati wanted to decorate herself and she wanted to go. It's a social event. She wanted to be there, and she was said, let's not go. So, the Duryodhana, when Indra felt insulted that my sacrifice will stop. And they say, it is not that Indra needed that particular sacrifice to be stable in Swarga. So it is a matter of ego, it's a matter of prestige for him. So the thing was that they went there and they performed the religious activity that was supposed to perform at the Prabhas. But then, because it was a social occasion, they started drinking. Now, the four regulatory principles are understood in different ways. At one level, the way Prabhupada explains it, this is what makes a person a human being. And that is true, but that is more from the human being as understood through Brahma Jigyasa. Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Who is a human being? A person who dharmo hitesham adhiko vishesh. One who is thinking of something beyond just the bodily rights. But even in the Vedic time, not everyone was like that. So the Kshatriyas, so if you look at the actual historical record, it was a section of the Brahmanas who followed the four elements. Not even all the Brahmanas. There are Brahmanas also who eat meat. When Yudhishthira is going up the Himalayas, at that time there are many Brahmanas, and he says that, oh venerable ones, this area where we're going to is sparse, and those of you who cannot live without meat, you can please go to the kingdom of Drupada. He will take care of you. I won't be able to take care of you. So he respects those Brahmanas even when they are eating meat. So now we say, how can Brahmanas eat meat? In the Vedic tradition, there are Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic rituals. And who are going to perform the Tamasic rituals of Tamasic forms of worship? That is the Brahmanas. Those Brahmanas will eat meat also. So, point I'm making is that the Yudhishthira gambling or the Yadus drinking, this was not an extraordinarily exceptional activity. Gambling was a part of Kshatriya culture. Drinking was a part of Kshatriya culture. Prabhupada writes in the first canto purport that although Rantidev was a Kshatriya, he never ate meat. Now, why does Prabhupada have to say something like that? Because among Kshatriyas, it is normal to shoot. See, they didn't have slaughterhouses, but Kshatriyas have to fight wars. And especially if they're going through various areas, if there are no farms there, the sages can live on roots and fruits, but warriors have to fight. And it's not that for fighting you need meat necessarily, or to have strength, but you need grains. If grains are not available, somebody goes through a desert, somebody goes to a forested area where there's no irrigation, then they have to kill animals and eat them. So the point was that the Yadus ate. Yadus, they drank. And after drinking, they became intoxicated. So I look at this pastime from three different levels. We look at the immediate, the intermediate, and the ultimate. The cause of the, you could say, fratricide. Fratricide was the fight among brothers or fight among the family. So now immediate, what triggered? They all got drunk, and one of the problems with the drinking, among the many problems, is that drinking lowers inhibitions. That there are normal inhibitions which restrain our behavior. And inhibitions, when they are lowered, now some people try to spin that positively, and they say, in the West, they have the idea that a bar is a very good place to have heart-to-heart discussions. Why? Because if you're drunk, your inhibitions are lowered. And there's a whole book called Socrates at a Bar. So Socrates is considered a big philosopher. So if Socrates goes to a bar, he says, bar is a place where people's inhibitions are lowered, so they will be able to have more philosophical discussions. It seems strange to us, but that is the idea. Now, while it is true that sometimes people may talk at times after drinking what they will not talk now, but that is not the only inhibition that gets lowered. What happens is that people can also become violent. People can become irrational, and many times domestic violence. It's a very horrible thing when it happens, and domestic violence is seen as a male-female issue, and it is. But if you look at the statistics overall, as a good amount of studies, domestic violence almost always, not always, but almost always accompanied with drinking. And it's much more of a alcoholism issue than a misogyny issue. That it's not so much of a males abusing their power attacking females. It's like bar fights are very common also. So the bar fights are usually men and men fighting each other. So it lowers impulses, and it lowers inhibitions, and it's likely to trigger violence in adolescence. So what happens after so when we say alcoholism, alcohol, what it does is lowers inhibitions. So inhibitions in terms of two things, speech and action. So right now I am analyzing this particular incident in the perspective of immediate cause. So what happens is that during the Kurukshetra war, the Dwarka Vasis have split. The Narayan Sena is on the Kaurava side. And along with the Narayan Sena, there is Krutavarman. Krutavarman is one particular commander, powerful commander. He fights on the Kaurava side. Now on the Pandava side, Krishna does not fight, but there is one particular warrior, Satyaki. From Drona, but he also learned from Arjuna. They consider like Arjuna's student. He's on the Pandava side. And there, Satyaki and Krutavarman start having an argument. And Krutavarman says to Satyaki, "Oh, what kind of student are you? You just passively watched on while your own guru was killed by his disciple. When Drona was killed by Drishtadyumna, was also a student. He said, you did nothing. What kind of characterless, mindless person are you? And Satyaki replies, look who's talking. He says, what kind of person are you? You watched on while Ashwatthama killed sleeping soldiers. He killed the Pandava's sons. They were like sons to you. They treated you like an uncle. And you not only didn't stop him, you assisted him. What kind of Kshatriya would ever do that? Shame on you. So, both of them start criticizing each other. And the Kshatriyas, for Kshatriya, what happens is, Sambhavitaschatirtir Maranadrichite. Dishonor is more unbearable than death. So, their inhibitions are lowered, they speak certain things, vicious criticisms, and because they're in a state of drunken stupor, they just immediately take out their swords and they start fighting each other. And in the fighting, Krutavarman gets the upper hand, just lops off the head or something. When that happens, there are people suppose they are angry, they attack and they stab Krutavarman. And Krishna is there, and Krishna said, oh, come and stop them. But everything just becomes devastating. It just becomes like a mad melee. And everybody starts attacking and killing each other. And because they are drunk, they are angry, and what's happened is horrendous. One of them has been killed, and we get back at them. So when the Yadus, we refer to them as one dynasty. Among them also there are many dynasties. There are Bhojas, Antakas, Rishis. So they have their internal tensions also. And those tensions also erupt. And what started off just simply like when people get drunk, they may just speak something. That degenerates into a utter disaster. So soon it just become a bloodbath and nobody is survived. Practically nobody is survived. Now when they go for drinking, none of the women are there at that time. That's a normal convention. Even in the West, when there were parties, at least previously, after the party would get over, the men would go for drinking or smoking, and the women would go elsewhere and talk. The women were elsewhere. But now people were completely unprotected at that particular time. And then now Krishna is there, Balaram is there, and then this happens so suddenly that even they are not able to stop it. And then when as if this disaster is not bad enough, then now it is foretold at that particular time. Krishna sees signs and Krishna says that now the ocean is going to rise, is going to consume Dwarka. So at that time, when this is going to happen, it's going to be even worse. So then eventually Balaram and Krishna depart from the world. Balaram, Sheshnag appears as he should take him away. Krishna enters Krishna goes to the forest, sits in a particular place for meditation, is hit by an arrow of a hunter, and he eventually passes away, departs from the world. And then Arjuna has come over there. And Arjuna has come over there. Krishna tells Arjuna that before that, when Arjuna Krishna is wounded, Uddhava comes to meet him. And Krishna speaks the Uddhava Gita to him. He tells him, go to the forest, we'll come to Uddhava Gita later. Then Arjuna meets Krishna. Arjuna shattered. Krishna tells Arjuna that take care of my queens. Now, several of his queens, the principal queens, they are not ready to come with him. So, when Krishna departs from the world, then they enter into Sati with him. Now, the remaining queens, they want to come with Arjuna, but then Arjuna is attacked. Arjuna attacked by some cowards. Arjuna is just not able to defend. And then these women are taken away. And Arjuna returns utterly devastated. And then the Pandavas say that all this happening is an indication that Kali Yuga is coming. Krishna has departed from the world, so we should also depart from the world. The Pandavas appointed Parishita as the successor, and then they depart from the world. So overall, it seems like a tragic end to a heroic tale. It's a terribly tragic, not just tragic, it's terribly tragic. So at a immediate level, we see that this is the result of alcoholism. That alcoholism is so dangerous that especially if there are tensions that have not been resolved. Now this several years go on. If Sartaki and Krishna had just talked with each other before, I try to make understand what happened. Why did they do something like this? Then they could have made sense of it. But those tensions were unresolved. Alcoholism, it acted like a matchstick. There was the fuel, is already there, and sometimes you wave a matchstick instead of fuel. The matchstick falls into the fuel and just burns, explodes. So alcoholism plus unresolved tensions. So we say that this was at one level the cause. At another level, the cause are the curses. The two curses, the curses by the sages, that led to the specific interfighting among the Yadus. Now, what is described is that they had put, the Yadu princes had put some like kind of a rod in their body. And they used that, and around the body, near the belly, they put it in a cloth. And they said they put actually some kind of a grass, a rod or grass, whatever word it is. That rod, when they went back and told the sages of curses, and they took the rod and they broke it into small particles and then threw it in the ocean. But then that came back with the ocean into the coast with the tide, and that became a part of the tall, powerful like weeds. The word is grass, but they're more like weeds, like bars. And the Yadus, because they had gone to a religious place, they had not really gone with many weapons. Some of them had their sword, but not many weapons. So then they just picked up these bar-like weeds and they hit each other with that. So the curse was the cause at one level. The Gandhari's curse was also that Krishna would live alone. He would be without his family and dynasty. And that was the curse also said. Now we may consider that but Krishna is God. No, why would Krishna not intervene? Why would Krishna let this go on? So see, as I mentioned earlier, Krishna uses his omnipotence at times, and Krishna does not use omnipotence. So, like when Kalia was holding on to Krishna, Krishna did not use omnipotence for some time. In some Leelas, Krishna shows his omnipotence after some time. So, in some Leelas, Krishna may show his omnipotence right in the beginning itself. Some demons come along, Keshi comes along, Krishna just takes his hand out, and his hand acts like a weapon and kills him. With respect to some other demon, Krishna goes into the belly of Akasur, but then he comes out to be a very burning thing. He shows omnipotence there a little bit. He comes out and then he rips apart Akasur. So Krishna may show his omnipotence at different times. In the Draupadi Leela, Krishna shows his omnipotence not by stopping Dushasana, but by endlessly extending the rope of Draupadi. In Abhimanyu's incident, Krishna didn't show his omnipotence at that time. Krishna showed it the next day in Arjuna's incident for Arjuna to help Lilananda Chaitanya. So Krishna may choose not to show his omnipotence sometimes. And if our faith, we turn to Krishna for answers. And that is important. Krishna, this is going on in my life, please help me. And that's what prayers. Prayers could be, they could be practical. We can look for practical answers, we can look for philosophical answers. And it's important that Krishna will answers. That is true. But eventually we need to turn to Krishna as the answer. Not for answers, but as the answer. It's just like Krishna can give us desirable things. But ultimately we have to understand that Krishna is the supreme desire. That Krishna is Krishna's greatest gift. Krishna can give us wealth, Krishna can give us fame, Krishna can give us power. But ultimately, Krishna's greatest gift is that he becomes manifest more and more in our heart. So similarly, when Sarva Dharman Parityajya, it is The sense of dharma is the sense of right and wrong. There is right and wrong from a moral perspective, but there is right and wrong even from a rational perspective. And both kind of dharma we need to be ready to give up for Krishna. It says that somebody can come from the jnana path towards bhakti, but ultimately one has to give up one's jnana to fully surrender to Krishna. That doesn't mean that is the way that normally functions, but there are times when that is required. So now, when Krishna does this particular pastime, so like I said, there's a tension between dharma and bhakti. So the purpose of dharma is to maintain order here in the world. The purpose of bhakti is to attract us to Krishna. So these are two distinct purposes. And many times these two can go together, but sometimes they do go opposite ways. So when this happens, Krishna in this particular pastime, in the Dwarka Lila as it is called. Dwarka is destruction. Dwarka Lila. Actually, Krishna emphasizes dharma more than bhakti. That Krishna wants to show that although he is God, he voluntarily accepts the curse that Lilananda. So Krishna is God. So now we talk about literal, ethical, and allegorical and devotional perspectives. So sometimes, some pastimes have to be focused only on the devotional perspective. Just Krishna childhood pastime. So some pastimes, Krishna may focus more on the ethical dimension than the devotional dimension. And Krishna may want to teach some ethical lessons, even if those are devotionally disruptive. So now Yudhishthira is gambling. Now we may say that Yudhishthira is a pure devotee, his whole gambling was arranged by Krishna. Well, that's a devotional way of looking at it. And it is true that eventually what happens? That eventually through everything that happens, Krishna's demonstration of how he protects his devotees, how he protects Draupadi comes. And that's wonderful. Now, but does that mean that what Yudhishthira did was right? We sometimes, when we look from the Bhagavatam's perspective, Bhakti perspective, we consider the characters to be unquestionable. And they are so transcendental that we cannot question them. That is not the Bhagavatam, so that is not the Mahabharata's perspective. The Draupadi, she's angry with Yudhishthira. How could you gamble like this? And Yudhishthira doesn't say, I am the husband, I am always right. Doesn't say, I am a pure devotee, I am Dharmaraja, I am always right. He actually explains. He says that, I was obliged to gamble. And I felt that I need some resources to take care of my family, to do my duty of protecting the Brahmanas. Therefore, when I was losing, I was thinking, I just need to win once, and then we'll stop. So Yudhishthira was, you could say, pressured to gamble. But how much to gamble? Yudhishthira himself says, I made a mistake. I should have stopped much earlier. He said, I got carried away. But that he got carried away not simply because he was a gambling addict. Because his concerns were higher. His concern was his wealth is meant for serving the Brahmanas. If that wealth goes away, how will I do my dharma? Therefore, I need this wealth. So, a gambling addict is just so concerned about winning in gambling that the person doesn't think about anything else. So he was thinking about higher things, but still he got caught. So some people say, if you still gamble, then why should we gamble? Well, from an ethical perspective, that pastime's message is exactly the opposite. That even a person like Yudhishthira's caliber, when he gambled, he got into so much trouble. So if we gamble, what is likely to be our fate? So be careful. So similarly, the Yadus are great souls. But when they get drunk, this is what the result. When they offend sages, this is what the result. And how much more careful should we be about this? So in some pastimes, Krishna focuses on giving lessons about dharma than about bhakti. That he emphasizes certain ethical principles. And So when dharma and bhakti have a tension, then we need to understand what is to be learned from it. So this particular pastime is not for devotional inspiration. It is for ethical instruction. So these two are very different things. And the purpose of this pastime is ethical instruction. Ethical instruction is many things. As I said, first is don't get drunk. Second is that don't let unresolved tensions just fester. They will explode at a bad time. And don't offend the sages. Is this a devotional instruction? Yes, the sages are devoted as a devotional instruction. But it's also a general instruction. Don't offend respectable people. So this is not for devotional inspiration. So different pastimes serve different purposes. I make two last sub points in this point. That the Bhagavatam says that if somebody will conclude from this pastime that oh Krishna is not God, Krishna is ordinary mortal, that Krishna could not protect even his own family members. So then we need to consider these three things. First is Krishna has throughout his life done more than enough to protect his family members. He said he brings back the dead sons of his mother and reunites them with her. He brings back the dead son of his guru and reunites him with his guru. But for that he goes to the abode of Yam. As I said, the spiritual world is that once you go there, you don't come back. Yam's abode also, when you go, you don't come back. But he goes there and he comes back. So it is that person who went to the abode of Yamaraj and came back. That person who survived the many arrows that were hit at him when he was Arjuna's charioteer. Normally speaking, the charioteers are meant to attack the warriors are meant to attack the warriors. But the charioteers are also fair game. Because the idea is that if you immobilize the opposing warrior, then you can attack them more easily. So it is the warrior's responsibility to protect the chariot. Not just protect oneself, but also protect the chariot. So Arjuna Krishna was attacked. And the Bhagavatam also describes that when Krishna's body was covered, forehead was covered with blood, sweat and blood. So that person who survived many arrows being hit, being hit by many arrows in the Kurukshetra war, how would that person die by an arrow hit at the leg? Isn't it? So even at the level of, so we are using the word dharma. Dharma can refer to moral. And dharma at one sense can refer to rational. What is the right thing? Use a rational, moral sense to determine, use a rational sense to determine. So if you want to use it from a rational perspective, how can an arrow to the leg cause a fatal injury? Now the thing is that, and that arrow was also not hit by a trained warrior. Why trained warrior? Because trained warriors can shoot arrows with greater force. Arrows don't just have to be shot, their impact depends on how much force it is shot. So that's why arrows are different from guns. Guns is just special trigger. The mechanical element creates the force. But an arrow, the force has to be created by the person shooting it. So it's a hunter bigger animals, they're not that weak. But it's not that they're super strong. So here, what is happening? It is that Krishna is letting things happen in a particular. Now we can look at this incident and say Krishna is not omnipotent. Okay, that's one way to look at it. But then we can look at so many incidents throughout his life that are very shown omnipotence. So it is a matter of choice for us. What do we focus on? And then the last point which Krishna Charitra Prabhuji elaborates, Jiva mentions is there is Asura Mohan Leela. Asura Mohan Leela means what? That he says that within one of the avatars of Krishna is Mohini Murti. Now Mohini Murti is Vishnu himself, is the Supreme Lord himself. Normally, being attracted to the Supreme Lord will free us from illusion. But the demons were attracted to Mohini Murti and they went deeper into illusion. And Vishnu used the Mohini Murti form for a particular purpose. And now the Asuras were deluded by it, but after that even Shiva was deluded by it. However, the difference with Asuras and Shiva was that their overall disposition. The Asuras were so deluded that they just lost everything. They lost the plot and they continued fighting afterwards and they were killed eventually. The Lord Shiva was also deluded by Mohini Murti. And it was in one sense quite embarrassing. He chased after her, threw among his disciples in front of his wife. But after that whole thing happened, what happens is Lord Shiva is not conscious, oh, how embarrassing this is. He is not conscious of his own prestige and ego. He is conscious immediately about Krishna and his glory. He says, you, Vishnu, are the only person who could have done this. You are glorious. Nobody can put me in illusion, but you are so powerful that you put me in illusion. So now it's very easy when we are being humiliated to focus on our own humiliation. But it focuses on that this is incident, your glory is being demonstrated. So Mohini Murti, the response of the demons and the response of Shiva is different. Now Shiva would have said, okay, that yeah, you are glorious, I know you are glorious. Why did you have to do this to me? Why did you have to humiliate me like this? But Shiva doesn't focus on that. He focuses on the fact that this demonstrates the Lord's deluding potency. And that is the ultimate Lord's potency in a way that is extraordinary, unprecedented. So similarly, when we approach the Asur Mohan Leela, so the Lord takes a form to delude a demon. Sometimes the Lord performs certain pastimes which are also meant to separate the faithful from the faithless, the divine from the demoniac. So the demoniac will focus on the pastime which seems to challenge Krishna's omnipotence, Krishna's supreme position. And they will use that to say that Krishna is not God. Krishna cannot be God. So there will be demons and there will be devotees. Now, demons will stay deluded. Now, Prabhupada says about devotee, nature of life is such that sometimes devotees may also get perplexed. But a devotee, they don't get perplexed, but not discouraged or disconnected. A devotee may also get perplexed. What is Krishna doing over here? What is Krishna's plan in this speech? Prabhupada himself, he said in one lecture that when he was walking on the streets of Delhi, and a cow hit him. He just knocked on, he's trying to steal back to God. So Prabhupada says, I was thinking, why is this happening to me? What is Krishna doing? What is Krishna teaching me over here? Prabhupada was still Krishna conscious, but saying, what is Krishna teaching me over here? So, in terms of the way events happen, a devotee may also not be able to figure out things. A devotee can also be perplexed, but a devotee does not get discouraged. So, a devotee knows that there is some plan of Krishna. What is the plan? That has to be figured out. Now, the Bhagavatam says that the Yadus fought among themselves because Krishna, the Yadus could not be removed by any other means. And that's why they fought among themselves and removed it. Now, somebody from a rational perspective might say that, yeah, but they could have gracefully departed, they would have departed in the fight. They could have gracefully departed. Yes, that is true. The Bhagavatam is focusing on the Leela perspective. So, from an ethical perspective, the lesson here is that this is for establishing the principles of dharma, not the principles of bhakti. It is for each one of us to choose what we focus on. And sometimes I could respond that this choice of evidence, it is something which ultimately each one of us has to do. That if we consider, say we may say how there's a magnificent mechanism by which rains come. Water is taken by the cloud, and the clouds flow over the earth, and then there's the dew rains. And that's true. The clouds are like a mobile, airborne, aircraft-proof water tank. It's amazing technology. But then atheists will argue, if clouds are arranged by God to give rains, then why do clouds give rain on oceans? There's already so much water over there. Why does it have to rain on top of the oceans? Well, yes, it rains on oceans so that atheists can ask questions like this and stay atheists. So it's like if you have a house with 100 rooms and 99 rooms are very neat and tidy and one room is not at all tidy, it's complete mess. Then you can look at those 99 rooms and say, this room must have a good caretaker. And there must be some reason why this room is untidy. Or when you look at that one room and say there is no caretaker also. Or the caretaker is outside. Well, it depends on the choice of evidence. Both can find evidence to support it. Nityo Nityana Chetnas Chetnana Eko Bahunam Viruddhartikama. So Krishna is the one ultimate reality who maintains everyone. That maintenance is not just physical maintenance, it's also intellectual maintenance. When somebody wants to have a particular belief, Krishna will let them have that belief. Mattas Buddhir Jnanam Apomanancha. Krishna will give them a remembrance of the evidence that supports their idea. And Krishna will give them forgetfulness of all other evidence that opposes their idea. And in that way, Krishna reciprocates with them. So these are pastimes which, as devotees, generally don't focus on them. But our principle is that we ultimately want to need to choose what evidence do we focus on. In our own lives, there will be times when we will be wilted. Everything seems to be going wrong. And in Prabhupada's own life, Prabhupada was dedicated to Bhaktivedanta Thakur, but he was to some extent an outsider. In the sense that he was never an office bearer in the Gaudiya mind. He was not an active preacher on behalf of the Gaudiya mind. So he was an outsider. And then after his guru's departure, the Gaudiya mind just fractured. And it was tragic. There are various reasons for it. We will not go into that. But from Prabhupada's perspective, Prabhupada could have said that, that if these people who serve this Guru throughout their life, if they can't keep it together, then maybe this whole process doesn't work. Maybe the Guru is not right. They should not be following this. Prabhupada could have seen that evidence and said, okay, I don't want to get involved in this. It was a very real and painful evidence that was there. But Prabhupada focused on something else. Prabhupada focused on the fact that Bhaktivedanta Thakur had built a tradition. The fact that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had made a prophecy. And Prabhupada focused on the fact that his Guru had given the instruction. And then based on that, and now Prabhupada would even have said that I have been also trying this for so long. It's not working. So when Bhaktivedanta Thakur, one of his disciples, came back from UK, he told his Guru, now they had been sent with great fanfare and Bhaktivedanta Thakur had funded their mission. And when he came back, the first thing he said is, we tried. Your process doesn't work in the West. That was his reply. Bhaktivedanta Thakur was very displeased by it. So he said that it is not that what we did was inefficient. He said that your process doesn't work. The Prabhupada could have said, I tried it. I tried for 40 years, it doesn't work. Prabhupada could have come to that conclusion. And people say it's a shockingly disrespectful and terrible conclusion. But from their perspective, those disciples who went to UK, they didn't work hard. They tried to give talks, they tried to do what they could. It didn't work. So Prabhupada also didn't work for so long. But then Prabhupada did not focus on that evidence. Prabhupada focused on the history where Gaudiya Vaishnavism has recovered, has spread. He focused on Mahaprabhu's reflection, he focused on Guru's instruction. And Prabhupada did not. So for each one of us, we have to choose our evidence. What is the evidence that we focus on? Ravindranath provides in one of his Vyaspuja offerings. See, we have the letters that Prabhupada wrote to his disciples. But the letters that the disciples wrote to Prabhupada have become confidential. Because they had many problems and they talked about their personal problems with their Guru. So he said, because he was office bearer, one day he got hold of those letters, many years later, 1980s. And then he said, I had read those letters for about 5-6 hours, and those were the most depressing hours of my entire life. Everyone whom I considered to be like a big leader, a success story of our movement, every one of them had such problems. I was thinking, does this process even work? Now, who is a person who is actually successful in Krishna consciousness? Is there even one person like that? He said, I just didn't see any light in the darkness that was engulfing my soul. He said, then suddenly, somehow, he says, it was by an act of mercy, my thoughts shifted from my situation to your situation, Prabhupada. He said, Prabhupada, I am just hearing about these problems. You were dealing with all these problems. And you never became discouraged. It is that you were like a commander who were leading an army, and all around you, your soldiers were getting wounded, your generals were getting wounded, and you never stopped fighting the war. He said, because your vision was fixed on Krishna, not on what is happening in the world. You were aware of it, but your faith was coming from Krishna. And because of that, rather than saying, oh, so many people have fallen in this war or are falling in this war, you were seeing that it is Krishna who has sent you so many people. And you were confident that one devotee very close to Prabhupada, a disciple, he had some problems and he left the movement. So Prabhupada wrote a letter to him and he says, I've heard this news and I'm feeling so distressed. And rather than coming to me, you're gone away and I'm feeling so forlorn. Now, forlorn is a very poetic word. Forlorn means like abandoned, lonely, deserted. I'm feeling so forlorn. But then Prabhupada goes on further and he says toward the end that nonetheless, I'm confident that this is the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Lord will send the souls to assist me in this mission. If not you, then someone else. That doesn't mean that Prabhupada didn't care for that person. But Prabhupada cared for Krishna more. Prabhupada cared for Krishna's cause more. So ultimately, this is the point we want to go. Faith is a choice of evidence. I mentioned this earlier. So Prabhupada could have focused on the evidence of so many devotees having difficulty in saying maybe Krishna consciousness doesn't work. Prabhupada focused on the fact that I have the opportunity to share Krishna consciousness in the West. That itself is miraculous. That people are taking it up, that is miraculous. That there are some people who are succeeding, that itself is miraculous. So we have to choose the evidence, which is the evidence that enhances faith, and which is the evidence that challenges our faith or extinguishes our faith. So depending on which evidence we focus on, we will be able to grow in bhakti or not grow in bhakti. So anukulyasya sankalpa, prakulyasya vachana. So the evidence that challenges our faith, we try to make some sense of it, but we don't dwell on it too much. We accept it, and see what will happen. We try to come to some sensible explanation, something that makes some sense, and then we move on with our life. So I'll summarize what we discussed today. So we were discussing primarily about the bewildering pastimes of Krishna. Bewildering in terms of faith bewildering pastimes. Not just intellectual faith bewildering pastimes, not just modeling bewildering. So I started by talking about how when Krishna descends to this world, Krishna's descent is having dual purposes. It is to establish dharma and it is to inspire bhakti. And Manushyanam Saraswati, people who are going to practice bhakti are always going to be few. So sometimes both these purposes can be served together. Establishing Yudhishthira as a king, Yudhishthira is virtuous and going to establish dharma. The bhakta is also going to inspire bhakti. Sometimes the two can go together. So they can go together in, say, Yudhishthira's enthronement, for example. But they can go opposite, which is what happens in the Yadudhava Leela. So then we discussed about the various incidents in Krishna's past, the life story of Krishna with key incidents. So Krishna's moving to Dwarka was a way of protecting of using water as a way to protect the citizens, protect the citizens. So now we discussed the Yadudhava that could be understood in terms of immediate cause. The immediate cause was drinking. We discussed elaborately how drinking lowers inhibitions, and both the words and actions can become intemperate and indiscriminate. It is the intermediate level, it is the curses. So Krishna is God, but sometimes Krishna wants to establish the principle of dharma. He lets himself or his loved ones be affected by curses. So sometimes when we talk about this LEAD acronym, that Krishna focuses sometimes on a particular level and he's teaching at a particular level. And the ultimate cause is that Krishna provides evidence for everyone. Whatever you Krishna Lila that, Krishna provides evidence for everyone depending on what they want to do. So that's the Asura Mohan Lila. So Krishna comes in a way that if somebody wants to be deluded, they can also be deluded. So ultimately, we discussed that faith is a matter of our choice of evidence. So I started by talking about how when we talk about Krishna Lila, we have to see some have to be approached with the head, and they are for analyzing. There's nothing to relish in those pastimes, but analyzing so that we make some sense of. Some are to be approached with the heart, where they are for religion, and we need to know which is anukul when. So approaching the pastimes, say seeing the pastimes of Krishna protecting the devotees, protecting the ensuring that his Vrindavan pastimes, or ensuring that the Pandavas win. That is the pastime which you can approach with our heart. But other pastimes you need to approach with our head, and we have to find out ultimately which is favorable for our devotion. So we try to make sense. So we try to make some sense of bewildering pastimes. But we focus on our devotion enhancing pastimes. So devotion enhancing means that they could be enhancing our devotion through the demonstration of Krishna's love, through relishing, through even evaluating, analyzing sometimes. But ultimately we choose for them for us. And we know. Thank you very much. Hare
Hare. Let us thank His grace, Chaitanya Charan Prabhuji, three loud and enthusiastic Hari Bol. So, how many of you felt that Prabhuji was opening door and windows and I don't know what not in our brains, taking us through the nervous system and finally opening the window and showing this is what you should understand. I'm sorry, yesterday I didn't have sleep, I was just slept for some time. I was dozing off, but so I really felt, Prabhu, you have spoken in 90 minutes a 500-page book that can be everything is right. The way you're opening, starting from the lead, and then going into religion can also be for entertainment also, and there can be this also, and that one more window, and then you go to further. So finally, the faith goes there, and you say, okay, it's there. Then one more. It is what it is. But what? One way you can see. Do I need to hear this? Right? One way you can see. Do I need to hear? इतना intellectuals चाहिए क्या? इतना समझने की जरूरत है क्या? But another way you can see how much Prabhuji loves us, that he has taken the effort to increase our faith, even in this. Only devotees would take the effort to push us into all angles to make sure ultimately they give us a smooth landing, right? And actually, maybe Prabhuji was actually not going to discuss this as part of Dwarka Lila, but it was me who asked Prabhuji that, Prabhuji, please, can you cover this, this Prabhat Kshetra Lila and the whole thing? Because, well, trying to become a devotee, but then there is always this gray area which is so difficult to explain anybody when they challenge us. Already I'm struggling with my faith, and somebody puts a Brahmastra on that faith, and I'm like, Arey, kya bolu main? So now I know how to answer two ways. One is I try to repeat, what you told, a part of it, or I'll send the link of this lecture. I'm sure will not ask you questions. But that also in two ways. Like that either he understood everything or he did not understand it. Because it really requires faith and it really requires so much desire to know why Krishna did what he did. Even now I have a question, which probably choose to answer now or later. Why did he even give Narayani Sena? That when he knows that Duryodhana is going to use it for Adharma, and Narayani Sena belongs to him, why would he even do that? It's so difficult to ignore. And what did he preach the Narayani Sena before he sent them for the war? That I will be standing on the opposite side, don't mind shooting me. And like, Krishna will love you. We are Yadus, you are part of us. So what was the other side thinking when they were fighting on behalf of Lord Krishna? And similarly, many more questions. They keep popping up. But your conclusion there too was so important that what is the evidence are we looking at ultimately? Will that question lead us to devotion or will that question lead us to more doubts? Or there is no end to understanding what Krishna did, what he did. But one thing is for sure, Prabhupada told us many times that Krishna is waiting to see us back to Godhead. So that is the primary thing, that drives when we go through difficulties also, that Krishna will take us back ultimately, so Krishna is waiting. So, can you answer some questions now, Prabhuji?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any more questions?
Just to make your point that in 1.5 hours, I spoke a 500-page book. Maybe 10 years ago, I would have felt delighted by that. Now I feel worried by that.
I'm sorry, that was my.
I make a particular point. Like I have a friend who is a devotee now, but before that he was into MMA, mixed martial art. So he would say that our definition of a good workout is that you, at the end of the workout, feel pain in parts of the body that you didn't even know existed. So he was telling me that after hearing your class, I feel exhaustion in parts of my brain that I don't even know existed. So that I think I did try to make it as simple as possible, but it is a complicated pastime, and I try to analyze and as I said, but yeah, if there are questions, it will be good to address them. And as usual, we would want to start taking prasadam. We're going to close the altar and we'll do something.
It's a Saturday, so I believe.
No, but hunger doesn't wait for Saturday. So I'm perfectly fine with that.
We want to hear the answer. It's someone.
No, I think we should close your eyes and then ask the question.
Let's take another 15 minutes. Is that okay? Yes.
So regarding the specific question, see, for the Kshatriyas, fighting, it's a yuddhe chapya parayana. Fighting was many things for them. At one level, it was their passion. Passion means the Kshatriyas, that's what they train for lifelong. And that's what they just want to fight. Now, you would say it was also their duty. They are meant to fight in a virtuous way. But the idea was, you see, sometimes the Kshatriyas they are not very particular about which side they fight on. Like who is that person who first comes on Duryodhana's side and then is described in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam? Rukmi, I think. No, he first comes on the Kaurava side, the Kauravas refuse him, and then comes the Pandava side, Pandavas refuse him. Not Shalya. Shalya eventually, he's tricked by Duryodhana into fighting on the side of the Kauravas. So, but I think it's Rukmi only. Not Rukmi?
He's a cousin of Duryodhana, right? The brother who ships the. Is that
No, that is talking about defection before. No, there is this person comes with his own army. That's Shalya. That's Shalya. No, anyway, the point is, you can find out the name afterwards, I tell you. But anyway, this king, he comes and he is very arrogant. And he tells Duryodhana that, although you are difficult enemy, you are fortunate that I'm there on your side. And I'll help you do it. I'll ensure that you will. And Duryodhana is annoyed by his arrogance. He says, I don't need you. Then he goes to Yudhishthira and says the same thing. Yudhishthira also says, I don't need you. And he gets frustrated and goes back. So basically, in some ways, fighting is what Kshatriyas do. So now, ideally speaking, Kshatriyas should also have the guna and karma. They should also be deliberate on whose side they are fighting. But fighting is their duty. They do that. And Krishna also tries to, Krishna is sometimes very, you could say, opportunistic. When Krishna tells, when Karna says before the war, that as long as Bhishma is the commander, I will not fight beside the Kauravas. So Krishna goes to Karna and says, no, Bhishma has respected you, you come and fight against him. And Karna actually is tempted a little bit for a few moments. But he thinks, actually, I am fighting against Bhishma, but I am also fighting against Duryodhana. I can't do that to Duryodhana. So he says no. But the point is that warriors would fight. So warriors would fight. And so it was their duty. So when Krishna told the Yadu soldiers that this is the side you have to fight on, they fought on that side. So Kritavatman and Arjuna had some fights. They were friends, but on war, on the warfield they had to fight against each other. That is the nature of Kshatriya life. So now, what were they thinking? At one level, it's just, they would not be happy doing that they would fight against Krishna. But if that's what they are told to do, that's what they would do. So it is our duty to fight, and the understanding at that time was that you die in honorably while fighting, then you are sent to heavens. So they would fight honorably that way. Any other questions?
Any other?
You have a mic.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for the wonderful class. One question I had before the class, but you answered partially. Like, how do we understand Krishna's family? The number I don't remember exactly. Like, it ran into like some crores. I think who were in Dwarka. Like Krishna's children and grandchildren, just his family. So the logical question is, how could they fit in like one island? And similarly, the questions are like one Akshayani is like some crore number comes, right? So how could they accommodate in one battleship, like 11 plus 7? Okay. So how do we understand this?
Yeah. So I think there are two levels of, whenever it comes to figures, specific numbers, there are two ways of looking at it. One is that it is poetic. And in the Chaitanya Charan also it is described that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself says that the great poets have glorified Krishna using many literary instruments like metaphors and hyperboles. Atishoyakti. The Atishoyakti is exaggeration. That is a poetic ornament. And it is quite possible that such poetic ornaments can be used. And we see that it's often there. So when it is said that, for example, Naham Vasami Vaikunte Yoginam Deveshwara, it is said that Lord Vishnu is telling Narada that I don't reside in Vaikunta, I don't reside in the heart of the yogis. I reside where my devotees glorify me. But does that mean that if you go to Vaikuntha, you find Vaikuntha vacant over there? No, there's an emphasis of that particular statement. What is that? Okay, Krishna is there in Vaikuntha, Krishna is there in the heart of the yogis, but we can't perceive him there. We can perceive his presence when devotees come to get him glorified. So, non-literal usage is very common in scripture because much of scripture is Kavya. You consider 16.21 the Bhagavad Gita. Trividham narkasyedam dwara nashinam. There are three gates to hell. They destroy the soul. And they are kama, krodha, lobha. But the Gita is 270 says avinashi tu tatvitti. The soul cannot be destroyed. Then how can you have atmanasham? So the atmanasha is non-literal. Like the Upanishad said, ye kech atmahanochana. These are the killers of the soul. Soul cannot be killed. It's non-literal. So there are lots of non-literal usages. So we could say that these are poetic, all of these. And that's perfectly fine. How did you say Chaitanya to have 1 million wives? That some figure is given like that. Now somebody might argue logically, even if he was wealthy enough to maintain 1 million women, just to be with 1 million women takes time. And how did he manage that? So Prabhupada in one purport says that he had hundreds of thousands of wives. He had hundreds and thousands of wives. So Prabhupada is giving a general figure over there. None of the commentators emphasize on that way. With respect to Krishna, 6,108 is emphasized. Somebody may say that this is inconceivable, this is achintya. Well, that is a misuse of the concept of achintya. Achintya and inconceivable is not used by Jiva Goswami, not used by previous acharyas, simply as an escape way for explaining that it can't explain. It is used specifically by Jiva Goswami that there are two opposite statements in scripture. And because we consider scripture to be true, both are considered to be true. And when both, we cannot figure out a way in which both can be simultaneously true. That is when we say it is achintya. It is not just that, okay, one statement cannot make sense, it's achintya. That is not right. So, so the thing is that it could be that Chitraketu had some mystic powers and he could have expanded. So you could say one is poetic, the other is mystical. That's one explanation. So basically two explanations. Let's say Krishna uses mystical potential, exactly how it we don't know. So now it is for Chitraketu specifically, there is no evidence in the past time that he had any particular mystic powers. If he had mystic powers, he could just use one of the mystic powers to beget a child. So he didn't do that. So the point of the story is what? That he was so wealthy, still he could not have a child. So the point of the story is not affected by the specific number of wives he had. Isn't it? So if somebody could take it as he had some mystical power, somebody could say it as a poetic exaggeration. And both are perfectly fine. So it depends on a particular person's rational faculty. If the rational faculty is very strong in someone, and for them we insist this is all mystical potency, as Krishna's omnipotence or some mystical potency, then they may find it very difficult to accept. So just as there is scope for desires within bhakti. Okay, somebody wants to eat this much food, somebody wants to eat this much food. Somebody wants to eat simple food, somebody wants to eat more luxurious food. So just like there is space for karma within bhakti, there is space for jnana also within bhakti. That means that's what Prabhupada calls intellectual speculation. That means we can come up with different meanings or different ways of understanding certain things. They have to be within a boundary. The boundary is that we don't reject Shastra. But how exactly we make sense of Shastra, that can be. So this could be poetic, this could be mystical. Yes, please.
Krishna Prabhu, how hell leads to purification? Because
Hell doesn't lead to purification. Hell leads to retribution. Retribution is punishment. So it is basically a place where negative karma is exhausted. And at a conscious level, they may not remember being to hell. But at a subconscious level, certain impressions are created. See, for all of us, when we grow up, there are certain things which we will just not do. say we get angry and we sometimes speak foul words. We get angry and hit someone. But we all have our boundaries that we don't consider as good. Even if we are angry, no matter how angry we get, we will not shoot someone. Even people who are in the police or military, they say the first person who kills someone, it's very difficult. Afterwards, it will become routine and nonchalant. It's terrible. Like many times people vomit after they kill a first person. So we all have certain boundaries. We just won't do. Because it's just basic human decency. It's true, but it's also coming from samskaras from previous lives. So hell and the punishment that we go through in hell, that creates a subconscious impressions, which deter us from wrongdoing in future lives.
One more thing, like when we talk about taking shelter of Krishna, so it is said that Krishna guarantees to protect us spiritually, but not materially. So when we read the Sridhar Swami pastime, so it may also happen in some other case that that for that child some parents would not have come. So how we conclude from that pastime that Krishna always protects his devotee like this?
Okay. So the pastime where a child was protected by the Lord, even when the parent renounced the world or whatever. So now pastimes are demonstrations. They are specific demonstrations of a principle. That doesn't mean those are patterns that will be universally replicated. It certainly does not mean that all parents should now just abandon their children and just say that Krishna will protect them. No. The idea is that Krishna, generally speaking, protects or functions in this world through human agents. So Krishna protects through the parents. That's how it is normally. So I have one friend. He said that I'm never going to have children. Yeah, I saw some. He says when you have a newborn baby, how much trouble you have to take care of the baby. He says I see what everybody is doing. I'm never going to do that. But he said when I had a child, I just can't explain how I started feeling so much attraction. That we could call it attachment, but it's not an attachment. It is actually arranged by nature. So that because that children need to be taken care of, parents actually feel that affection. And it's vital for feeling that affection. So the point I'm making is that parents are the normal protectors of children. And parents should be normally protecting children. But there are times when the normal protectors may not be there. So at that time, Krishna may intervene. But our faith in Krishna should increase so that it's a very important point, there are extraordinary incidences. Generally speaking, extraordinary incidents of any kind. One of my friends was a novelist, and he said that he takes inspiration from the people in his life. So all his friends are ready. I'm not going to come in the next novel of him. I'm not going to come in a positive way or a negative way. But anyway, he says, generally speaking, no one person's life is interesting enough to make that into one character. So one character is a composite of many people. So the point I'm making is that generally speaking, just a routine incidents don't stay in our mind. If we recorded everything that we did one day, and if the next day I just sit and watch everything that I did, we'll get bored within 10 minutes. Although it's our own life, we'll get bored. Okay, we go on to look at particular times, particular incidents. So generally, ordinary incidents don't stay in the mind. That's why the scripture has to teach lessons memorably. It uses extraordinary incidents. But when extraordinary incidents could be there, like Bharat Maharaj got attracted to a deer and he got liberated. Now, when Ajahn chanted one name and he was delivered. So these are extraordinary incidents. Now the purpose of this is not to normalize the extraordinary. So as it is not that after hearing the pastime of Ajahn being delivered by chanting one name of Narayan, Shukdev Goswami says, Shukdev says to Shukdev Goswami, just stop speaking now. I don't want to hear for 7 days. When Takshar comes, I will chant Narayan name. He doesn't do that. What does he say? Actually, the mood over there is If the Lord can be so merciful that one incidental chat can deliver, then regular devotional service, how surely the Lord will deliver, isn't it? So it is not to normalize the extraordinary, it is to emphasize the ordinary. That. So what is the ordinary over here? That the ordinary, I'm not in the ordinary in the sense that it's standard inputs. And we don't have non-standard expectations. See, the standard is that we practice devote complete to Lord. So Bharat Maharaj's pastime, what does it mean that should we always be afraid of being attached to anything in the world? Well, not necessarily. We have to be careful. That careful, not just that I get attached, you still get attached in the world. You need to have emotional connection. You can't live parent, emotional parent. But you have to be careful where our attachments are taking us. That's why the influence of the pastime is we should have devotees around us who will warn us if we are doing wrong. So we cannot take one pastime and make an absolute lesson in that pastime. So generally, whenever we are hearing scripture, so we can absolutize every pastime, and that's not healthy. We can relativize every pastime, and that day, it was true at that time, it is not true now. But what we need, both of them are healthy. What we do is contextualize. So contextualize means what? We look at the point, and we look at the point of the point. What is it that is being conveyed through that? And that's how we learn it. Yes, ma'am.
Krishna Prabhuji. So my doubt is about an extension of what Ravi Prabhu asked about location and stuff. So in the fifth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, we see that Bharatavarsha is described in a much more like with many yojanas, and which is not really the Bharat of today. So I have heard this, but I don't remember the context or whether it has an authentic source. But everything of this happened, and this is only a kind of a model, like how we have apartments and then there is a model of it. Like what we have today, the Bharat or India, is just a model representation of something where actually these things happen. So what is the truth? Are the incidents really happened in this country, in this geographical location? Or is just like Bhauma Vrindavan is a representation of the spiritual Vrindavan? Is it something like that? So then it will be explainable with those dimensions. But with this dimensions, it looks very like. And how do we explain the same thing to somebody who is not into devotion and has come to a class and asked the same question? What should be our ideal answers be?
So Bhagavatam cosmography is an elaborate subject, and I just try to make 3 quick points over here. See, first is that again the point and the point of the point. So that Parikshit Maharaj is about to die in 7 days. He is not studying to get a PhD in cosmology. His interest is Krishna consciousness. Now, there are 2 ways of becoming Krishna conscious. One is to bring Krishna into our consciousness. And this is what normally do. We hear about Krishna, chant his holy name, look at his pictures. But the other is bring what is in our consciousness to Krishna. Bring what is already in our consciousness to Krishna. So, for example, we may have heard some stories, some moral stories in our childhood. So somebody may have heard Tenali Ramte, somebody may have heard of Akbar Bikbar tales, somebody may have heard, in the West there are, each tradition has its own stories. There's one devotee who is current in Africa, just sent me a copy of his book. He said that he is writing like a Krishna conscious commentary on African folk tales. So those are there already in people's minds. So you say, what Krishna consciousness can we grow? That's another way of being Krishna conscious. What is already in our consciousness, we bring it to Krishna. So Christians are used this very well. Christians have a whole jagara of preachers whose main preaching is through movies. So movies are already in people's minds. So what are the Christian or Catholic lessons that can be drawn from those movies? They speak on that. So the idea is that particular section of the Bhagavatam is in the second one. that cosmography is already there in Parikshit Maharaj's mind. He is a well-educated person. He knows something about cosmography. And he wants to connect that cosmography with Krishna. How do I see this devotion? So that is the purpose. Purpose is not just to know cosmology or cosmography, but to actually connect with Krishna. So now in today's world, for us, that cosmology is itself very difficult to understand. So the point is to connect with Krishna. So do we need to understand that cosmology? It depends. The Prabhupada himself doesn't go into too much into the details of the cosmology. Prabhupada himself, when they wrote what to build a planetary, he said you find an expert to talk with him about the specifics. I give some general understanding. And Prabhupada's purports focuses more on the spiritual principles of bhakti rather than the specific dimensions that are there. We talk about the specific dimension, no doubt, but that's not his focus. So we have to be clear that that was one way to be Krishna conscious. That was relevant at that time. But it may not be relevant now. Say, for example, somebody is reading Ishopnishat. And Prabhupada says in the purport, there's a battle between going on between these communists and capitalists. Now, say 100 years down the line, 200 down the line, both communism and capitalism say a dead ideology. So, if somebody reads communism and capitalism in Prabhupada's books, does that person need to go and buy an look at encyclopedias, study communism and capitalism elaborately to understand what point Prabhupada is making? Not necessary. That is in people's minds today, and Prabhupada is using that. If that is not in people's minds, you don't have to get it into people's minds. So, in that sense, that study of cosmology is not necessary. It is something which is voluntary. If somebody feels that it will enhance their faith. Now, beyond that, still, you may say, I want to make some sense of what it is. So, there are multiple ways in which devotees have tried to make sense of it. See, we cannot really take much help from previous acharyas, because previous acharyas who commented on this, they were not interacting with the scientific world so much. So there are some insights which are very helpful with these acharyas communities. But science had not really, the scientific way of looking at the world had not come up at that time so much. So the three ways that I have seen, one is these are higher dimensions. They are describing higher dimensions. So that means that this is something happening at another level of reality. That's what you're talking about, the models. Now, the second is that it's a conceptual journey. Conceptual journey means that when our consciousness evolves, like the Brihad Bhagavatam describes the journey of the Gopakuma. So this kind of conceptual journey. So the point is not exactly what is there. The point is that we evolve our conceptions till we reach Krishna. So it's a conceptual journey. Now, while Prabhupada did not talk about this so much, Prabhupada's Gauranga Sridhar Maharaj, he has talked about this quite a bit. And there is some precedent to that in our tradition also, that is the Brihad Bhagavatam describing a literal journey of Gopakumar? Well, it could be. But the more important point in the literal journey is that the supremacy of Krishna is being demonstrated. And how Krishna Bhakti in Vrindavan is higher than all other conceptions of Punya or Bhakti. That is the key point. So, it is said that Brihad Bhagavatam was spoken by Uttara to Parikshit. Parikshit to Uttara before he departed. Now, 7 days are almost over. Shukadeva Goswami had gone. How much time was there? How did he speak in that much time? It's a question. You say it's a conceptual thing. You say that Krishna expanded time. There are many ways in which you explain, but it's a conceptual thing. Now, the third way of looking at it is that it is a historical conception. That means, now this is not something which I have seen our tradition talk about. But there are other Vaishnava traditions and their teachers who say that this was how people thought the universe was at that time. Now we think of it differently. I say that was incorrect and this is correct. Well, if somebody wants to take a rational perspective and say yes, at that time that was incorrect. Now our tradition has not taken that, but other Vaishnava traditions I have seen they have taken that. So It is possible that now Prabhupada also says that specifics can vary with time. That, for example, in the first canto purport, when Krishna takes a journey from Hastinapur to Dwarka, his path is described. And Prabhupada says, some historians may try to retrace the exact path of Krishna. But Prabhupada, that the geology of the earth is constantly changing. And retracing the path is very difficult. As far as we are concerned, we are simply satisfied that Krishna has come to Dwarka and is performing his pastime as devotee. So Prabhupada doesn't focus on that. Now, can some people today actually look at the geographical location of the Mahabharata or the Ramayana and try to prove the historicity? That's definitely possible. But that doesn't have to be the primary focus for it. So how to understand these things? That is some intellectual space for it. So I would be very hesitant to use the idea of historical conception. But the other two, that is a conceptual journey and that it is a higher dimensions. So higher dimensions definitely possible. Now, I have not seen that being used for the earth. I have seen it being used, Sotra Swami talked about it for the Chandra. Because, see, what is described is that to our vision, the moon is just like a barren place. And that is true to some extent. That's what our experience is. But our experience is limited. So existence is multi-level. Like if you have a computer, then like you have an infinite computer, hundreds of people are working on different levels on that same data. Different people will have different levels of access. So if you're working on the same machine, you not even see a particular folder. Or you see a folder and you say you don't have access to it. But sometimes folders are very invisible. So like that, reality, our access to reality depends on adhikar. So we may come to a particular place, but we may not even see things about that place. So that is possible Chandraloka. Is it possible Bhumi, Earth also? Well, you could say it is possible. But I find a more reasonable explanation is that with respect to Bhumandal, the word Bhumandal itself means very different. Bharatvarsha means different things. So the terms may not always mean the same thing. So I have given a series of 3 classes on Bhagavad cosmology. That is on my YouTube channel in case you want to hear this. And Vedic Cosmography is a book written by Sadaput Prabhu. That's Dr. Richard L. Thompson. That I found is the best book as far as I have seen for giving a explanation of the cosmography which is intelligible for a rational mind. There are other books also written, and those books are just explaining what the Bhagavad is saying. But how to make sense of it from a modern perspective is not easy.
I saw the entire series by Parmeshwar. That was also really good.
Yeah, there are different resources available for us. Whichever resources help us to make sense. Yes, please.
Hare Krishna, one small question. So it's regarding faith. So when some circumstance happens in our life that questions our faith and we can't really understand it. So should we like necessarily make sense out of everything, or can we like stay like a little ignorant and be delusional in our faith, or is it necessary to make sense?
Is it necessary to make sense of everything? Well, what is necessary depends on what is a priority for us. Like some people are quite comfortable with not having answers. Okay, it doesn't matter to me. This happened, it doesn't, I don't know, I don't care also. Now, it was related to philosophy, some questions, how do you answer them? Who bothers? I'm not interested. That's perfectly fine approach. Now, if somebody is saying that I'm a scientific preacher, and somebody asks scientific questions, I don't care about it. Well, then don't call yourself a scientist. If you're in a particular service, then we need to be equipped for the service. But it's not that you have to make sense of everything. So, for some people, it's a big need for them. It's like a craving. You have to make sense of things. For some people, it's not a sense. I know sometimes things happen, we are finite beings, we can't make sense of things. So if we don't have a need, we don't have to worry too much about sense of things. But the need could be either personal, in terms of our own intellectual nature, or it could be the need could be in terms of social, our service. Otherwise, it's not necessary.
Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much for this enlightening class. When we were talking about talking about Yudhishthira and the Pandavas leaving and going to Prabhas Kshetra. One question was, where exactly is Prabhas Kshetra, if we can understand where exactly is it geographically? And secondly, I also heard about it that when they passed away and they went to Devaloka, heavenly planets, they saw Duryodhan there enjoying. So that is really confusing. So I was just thinking if you can enlighten that is something.
Okay, and so then the first question, Prabhas, I'm not sure. Is there a replica of Prasad Prabhas anywhere in Gujarat? In Dwarka?
It's somewhere close to Somnath. There's a Prabhas street.
Okay, so I think you can find out geography. Now, exactly whether that is the same as Prabhas Kshetra from the past, we don't know. But it does seem that it could be quite likely.
There's a temple to where Krishna went.
Okay, Prabhas Kshetra, that's fine. So now, with respect to the postmodern destinations, see the Mahabharata, see we are on earth, and there are higher domains. Heaven is the higher domain, and the spiritual world is the highest domain. So basically, bhakti takes us to the spiritual domain. Punya takes us to the heavens. So now the Mahabharata's focus is on karma kanda, the idea of going to heaven. The Bhagavatam's focus is on bhakti. So from the Bhagavatam's perspective, they want to describe it that the Pandavas went to the spiritual. But from the Mahabharata's perspective, the focus on karma kanda has been described that they went to heaven, the Pandavas went to heaven. And then they saw that the Duryodhana also in heaven. So the idea is, first of all, heaven is non-permanent. So heaven is a reward for certain actions, but it's a non-permanent reward. So Duryodhana had fought in the war and died an honorable fight. Although he tried to hide initially, eventually he fought. So it is said that if a warrior, a soldier, without flinching or running away, fights and dies, the reward for that action is heaven. Now that does not nullify what they have done in the previously throughout their life. The reactions will come to that eventually. So he went to heaven. Now, so I said the Pandavas also went to heaven. That's for a short movement to heaven because, from an ethical perspective, they had to do some things to win the war, which were questionable. But it was a brief period where they had to do it. So it is, from the Karmakanda perspective, a result of a particular action. It is not a permanent destination.
And so there are some people who say that the atheists, do they go to hell? Or they are.
See, atheist is a very big category. Because atheist people are not defined only by their belief system. They are defined by a variety of factors. Primarily would be their behavior. So how are the atheists living? So we may have stereotyped the idea of atheists who are just grossly materialistic, engage in self-gratification and even all kinds of terrible activities. And there are atheists like that, of course. But there are also atheists who are very, very thoughtful people. So, at least in the Western world, I've seen that it's far easier to have like a serious discussion or an intellectual discussion with atheists than it is with evangelical Christians or hardline Muslims. They have so much bought into their faith that their reasoning capacity has been blinded to. Most of the times, atheists, either they have been psychologically hurt, they have been hurt by religion in some way, by religious people in some way, but they have also reasoned their way to atheism. And so it's possible to help them reason their way out of atheism. Not with everyone. So I would say atheist is a category, but it's too huge a category. So we have to consider the atheist, overall their life is a Raguna, Rajguna, Tamuna. So tamasic atheists will go to hell.
And then this term, the common thing that they say is heaven and hell, everything is here only. So, do they believe that or?
Well, yes. See, heaven and hell these can be seen both in a literal sense and in a non-literal or metaphorical sense. So literal sense means that there are places in the structure of the universe. We have the earth is more or less in the middle, and above us is heaven, and below us is hell. So they are places where we go to, but they are not just physical places. These are also states of mind. So states of mind means that someone whose mind is filled with dark, devilish desires, someone is tormented by their own addictive cravings. That person is like living in hell right now.
So should we believe this and that both?
Yeah, so according to Vedic tradition, it is both. There's a literal aspect to it and a non-literal aspect to it. Both are there.
Day one I was trying to ask.
Stop it.
But this last 3 days I was trying to ask this question. Is it Krishna? Hare Krishna? Yeah. Simple question. On the first day of Krishna in Vrindavan pastime, it is a pastime about Kaliya, where he only mentioned about the emotions of Krishna. He was not actually coiled in the Kaliya foods, and he was waiting for Radha to come. He only mentioned about his emotions of he was waiting, and then once she came, but he didn't describe what were the emotions going on Radha when she has seen Krishna in that situation.
Everyone were affected by anxiety at that particular time. Because while Krishna had been in danger many times before with demons, they had not really seen this kind of situation. So this was, all of them were there, beholding, they were seeing it, and it was immense anxiety. Because what that was in Vilashe, Kali, Mardanaye, Dakadam, Badam, Kapadam, Murari, Gopangana, Chakushri, there was all of that is frantic with anxiety. What's going to happen in us? Krishna already dead. So Arani also came running, she was overwhelmed. A small girl at that time. She was also very worried. So, but then Krishna had answered, and that anxiety has changed to amazement and then admiration. How amazing and how admirable this is that his dancing is so spectacular. So the emotions change in the past times. Thank you very much. Shri Krishna Bhagwan ki jai. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhakta ki jai.
Let us try to play the children's both sing loud and enthusiastic Harimo. When will the time come again when we'll have another series? When we'll probably come back again. Right? So this is going to continue. The spiritual life will be nourished. Please, and I really thank everyone to come on the weekday mornings. I know how difficult it is to cancel the meetings, manage the meetings. Still, so many of you came. Loud Haribol for each other for doing this. And so thanks for some devotees who are sponsored to Prashadam. Please honor Prashadam now. And tomorrow, Prabhuji is giving his attendance class. And Prabhuji was very happy with the endeavor made by everybody for Rath Yatras. So he himself told, can I speak on the essence of Rath Yatras? This is Prabhu. So, I'm very eagerly waiting to hear how Prabhuji will explain, how to have the right vision towards Rath Yatras. So please come tomorrow early. We will start at 5:30. Don't come here at 6 o'clock. Come at 5:30 at least, so that we start on time. We get enough time. So Prabhuji also finishes, and day after tomorrow again Prabhuji is going to Warangal. For a long time he'll be in Warangal. He'll come back here for briefly for few other individual satsangs, and then he'll head back. So this was an unbelievable series, bro. Krishna in Vrindavan, Krishna in Dwarka, Mathura, Kurukshetra, and we only felt that as he was speaking and stopping, there is so much more. So maybe some other time, if there can be a part 2 of similar series or better another kind of seminars. Very nice. Thank you. Hare Krishna. The Prabhupada ki jai. Radha Madan Mohan ki jai. Gaur Prema.
So I have a couple of books behind. I wrote a new book on the Ramayana called Living the Ramayana. So there are some incidents from the Ramayana and life and some practical life lessons. So the Sita is abducted. Who is to be held responsible for that? When Ravana violated the boundaries, how can we prevent others from violating our boundaries? When Hanuman was alone in Lanka, how did Ravana get discouraged? So when Ahilya was cursed, was it that she was a victim? What exactly happened over there? So, like, the incidents I explained, and there's a calendar with 366 codes. This is different from the older calendar that I had got last time. The codes inspired by Bhagavad Gita. So both of them are available if you want. Thank you.
So please grab your copy because tomorrow in evening when it will be open, there will be 300 people here. I don't think you'll find yours. So whoever is here, take your copies right away. The mode of payment is also mentioned. Thank you very much. Okay, Prabhu.
I think they want it from the morning.
विशाल प्रभु का क्या क्या एग्जैक्ट होता है
You're going to fix it, and there will be going to be extinct. Couple of devotees, boys will also come with little habits. Habits too. So they come to fix it and habits. So probably we'll take your baggage also, and then some books. Some books.
Yeah. Take a quantity of it. Keep some here.
Some here and there. And then what time?
Maybe you can keep around 30, maybe 30, 34.